Good evening, everybody. I think we're ready to begin this evening's session. And I'll be talking today about Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So now this is a novella. I'm Mohini Khot, and
Mohini Khot is my better half. I'm Satish Khot. She's my better half. She is a professor of English literature and she loves reading. And she, instead of TV, she will be having a book in her hand at any time. And what she has done is more than that. The whole family, our whole family, except for the dog, is book fond of books, and they sit and read together. So from Mohini and a little bit from me has helped a lot. So Mohini loves her books, and you can make out from the way she will talk to you that is so. Mo, take it forward. It's all with you now.
Thank you. Okay, so now you know that we were to have somebody else actually this Sunday, but he was not able to make it. We do hope that he will join us later sometime, I mean, a month or two later. And the reason why he didn't bow out earlier is because he so wanted to come on and he was hoping he would be able to make it, but he couldn't. So I've taken over at very short notice, and I have hurriedly put together a PPT on Heart of Darkness, which we will go through. Now, I know that you will expect images, but there aren't going to be any. And the reason is that this book is so powerful. And I think each person who reads it will definitely have his own imaginative recreation of what he reads. So I decided not to impose any pictures on you all so that you can have your own images in your mind, as I want to very fiercely protect, the way I imagine what happens in this book. Now, films have been made of it. And I think the most famous adaptation is Francis Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which apparently uses the Vietnam War as the background instead of colonialism in Africa, and is a very powerful film. But I have just avoided seeing it because I just don't want anything to tamper with the impressions I carry of this book. So I'm going to share screen now. Okay, so Joseph Conrad. I don't know what your opinion of Joseph Conrad is, but his style of writing is not one of those very endearing styles that you take to immediately. It's not like Gone with the Wind, where you're hooked from sentence one. His style is rather dry, it's a bit impersonal. And the way they say that Jane Austen's novels are for girls, I would say Joseph Conrad's books are possibly for boys, in that sense. He has very few women characters. He's not very good with women characters, but what he writes off is very deep, and it's certainly worth reading. So I sort of read The Rover, first of all. Then I read Nostromo. Then I came to Heart of Darkness. And I love Heart of Darkness. I think it's one of those books that changes you forever. Seriously, I really mean this seriously. It changes your way of looking at things. It changes your way of thinking. So who was Joseph Conrad? He was Polish by birth and English by choice. So he was born in Poland at a time when Poland was occupied by Russia. So it was part of the Russian Empire. And the particular place that he was born in is today in Ukraine, because those boundaries have been drawn and redrawn over the years. He belonged to the Polish nobility, and his father was a patriot He was also a writer and translator, but he was a patriot. He was fighting for independence of Poland. He was trying to bring the boundaries back to what they used to be. He tried to abolish serfdom and tried for land reform. He was imprisoned. He was constantly on the move. He was making revolutionary speeches all over the place. And his wife supported him tremendously, so that when he was imprisoned, she chose to go with him. Joseph, therefore, an only child, was very often on his own. He grew up a lonely child. His mother died when he was 8. His father died when he was 11. He went to live with his uncle. I think the uncle took very good care of him and sort of propelled him towards a career that he would love, because his parents had disapproved of his yearning to become a seaman. But his uncle decided to let him do it. And he managed to get him to Austria. Now, Austria was also part of the Russian Empire at that time, but it had more liberal laws. So from Austria, it was easier to leave the country, and they managed it. So at the age of 16, Conrad left Poland. He went to Austria and then to Marseille in France, where he began a career at sea. This is what he wanted to do. Now, as a little boy, he loved to look at maps. And what attracted him was the wide open spaces, which hadn't been charted, which hadn't been explored. And he kept saying that he would go to those uncharted spaces and explore them for himself and discover them for himself. Now, by the time he became 16, some of those blank spaces on maps had got filled in. But Africa remained the most blank space on the map, and it was there, therefore, that he wanted to go. So he joined a merchant marine company, and in 1890, this Belgian trading company that he joined sent him to the Congo. Little bit about his fiction in general. The theme, now, Conrad writes about the sea and seamen. That's what he writes about. That's what he knows, that's what he lived, and that's what he writes about. So against this background of the sea, he talks about people who have faced challenges and the trials that the human spirit undergoes in this inscrutable and impassive universe. So clearly, Conrad is not an optimist, all right? The universe to him is a very hostile place. There's a short story called Amy Foster, in which there is a Polish man married to an English woman. And when they've been married many years and they have been happy, but he falls ill and he becomes delirious. And when he's delirious, he starts babbling in his native language, which his wife, an English woman, cannot understand. And she is frightened because suddenly she feels she doesn't know her husband anymore. So this theme of the strangeness and difference of people and how hard most people find it to accept difference is a recurring theme in his writing. The exploration of the human psyche is something that he does wonderfully, and you will see it in this novel as well. Now, this is the beginning of the era of modernism in which Conrad writes. So, of course, his characters are anti-heroic by and large. He admires idealism, but he deplores the hypocrisy that sometimes goes with it. So it's not genuine idealism, but a pose of idealism, which is something that he hates. Now, in his novels, we find lots of autobiographical instances, his own experiences, that he underwent at sea or on shore somewhere, pop up in his writings. Now, his diction, this is what makes Conrad unattractive to my mind. There might be diehard Conrad fans here today who will slaughter me for saying this, but the most unattractive thing about Conrad is his style. So what carries you through is his content, not his diction. Somehow, I think he never wrote English like an Englishman. And in fact, he always felt like a foreigner. He felt that he was a foreigner in England and he was a foreigner in Poland as well because he'd left it so long ago. So that sense of loneliness and exile is something that pops up again and again in his characters, in his fiction. Heart of Darkness is a novella. And I remember saying sometime that it was 100 pages only. But you know, the edition that I'm using right now, it's only 66 pages. So it depends on the font, it depends on the page size, but it's not a long novella even. So it's short. Now, it was first published in a serialized fashion, as was very popular in those times. So it came out in 3 parts, and in fact, the novella is divided into 3 parts. So it came out in Blackwood's magazine, which was a very reputed magazine. And the reason why Conrad was published in this is because by this time he had published the Malay trilogy and was established, as a writer. The novella is written at the height of the period of imperialism. Victoria was still on the throne, India was still the jewel in her crown, and the British were very proud of their empire. Now, this novella was written after a visit to the Congo by Conrad. So again, we have some first-hand experiences fictionalized in the novel. This is a map, just to give you an idea of where the Congo is. It's not now called Zaire, and the river Congo goes sort of along the, what shall I say, the western northern boundary into and curls into towards the center of the country, and that is the river on which our protagonist is going to be traveling in a steamboat. So the Congo is a long river, and it's the 9th largest river in the world. It's 4,700 kilometers long. And it was one of the things that had fascinated Conrad on the map when he was a child. He said he wanted to go there, and he finally did before he wrote this novel. Now, the scramble for Africa, I'm sure many of you must be aware of this. This is the heyday of colonialism. And Africa was practically the only part of the world that was left to colonize. And at this time, like from between 1880 and 1914, there happened what is referred to as the scramble for Africa, or the rape of Africa. Look at that strong word, rape, rape of Africa, the conquest of Africa, or the partition of Africa by the European nations. And why is the word partition used? Because when all these countries, mainly these 7 that are named over here, were sort of competing, for a share of the pie, as it were, Bismarck called a conference. And because of this conference in 1884, this was resolved in a peaceful fashion. And these 7 countries divided the pie between them, as it were. Now, King Leopold II of Belgium got the Congo, and he developed it as a personal fiefdom. Now, I was surprised when I discovered that it was not governed by the country of Belgium. In fact, Belgium as a country was only 50 years old, but it was his own personal property, which he personally governed, and he exploited, brutally, shockingly. Of course, the stories of colonialism are very stark and severe and shocking and mind-numbing, but I think Belgium seems to be a sort of the last word, in all this. And it's rather ghastly that it was a personal thing. The money was all coming to him. And it's only 5 years before he died that he handed it over to the country to govern. Now, the pose, I was talking of the pose of idealism. So look at this pose, and this is the general pose of colonizers. They set out to project that they have something to give, that they are bringing something to this country that they colonize to improve them, to help them, to better them, whether it's education or culture or whatever it is. What a pose. But this is the pose that he projected, that they were going to develop. It was a noble mission. They were going to develop the civilization. They were going to grapple with this primitive barbarism and reduce these primitive practices and teach them the ethics of Europe, mainly work. Now, this is so ironic because the way they made them work, I mean, they enslaved them. The reality was cruel exploitation, whatever the pose might have been. Now, when Europeans go to Africa, what happens to them? A, they cannot stand the climate and fall ill and die. The continent, that is the climate, the absence of the things that they are used to, has an effect on their minds and they go crazy. I mean, they seriously, they lose their minds, or they leave because they can't take it anymore. Now, some can withstand the climate and therefore survive and prosper. So in Heart of Darkness, the example is that of the manager of the outer station who has climbed very high on the ladder in his career merely because he has a strong constitution and has been able to withstand the climate of Africa, which most of them cannot quite manage. When these Europeans go to Africa, they try to maintain their European ways as much as possible, convinced of their superiority. They think that, they are much better than the Africans. So they certainly don't emulate the natives. They retain their separate European ways. Finding themselves in a position of power, they exploit the natives and the resources of the land in order to amass wealth and return to Europe with an enhanced status. That's why they all went. I mean, we all know that Robert Clive was apparently an absolutely no good give up case. And then he came to India, and became so big and so wealthy and famous and important and all that. So that's it. Now, in English literature, we have so many instances of characters who go to India. And the moment we know that they've gone to India, we can reasonably conclude that they are filthy rich, which they usually are, like Uncle Oliver in School for Scandal, and so on. So the people who went to Africa, I mean, it's like a hardship posting, but they went for the money. And at one point, our protagonist, Marlowe, asks the accountant at the station, who doesn't seem to like Africa at all, he says, "Why did you come here?" And the guy looks at him and he looks at him like he's mad. And he says, "Oh, for the money, what else?" So Kurtz, now Kurtz is at the center of this novel. Kurtz is a unique instance of a European who takes to the native customs, okay? And we'll see what happens there. So the storyline, now I had a tough time, because though it is so short, it's very dense. There's so much in this novel, and there's so much to say. And I was trying to say it all, and then I realized there's no point. I will take 1 hour just telling you the story, and there's no point. So although I feel that I'm sort of losing the soul when I reduce the storyline to 1 slide, that's what I've decided to do. So we have Marlowe, who is our narrator, a young man who has this very adventurous spirit. He wants to see the world, and particularly he wants to go to places no one has been to, or very few people have gone to. So that spirit of the adventurer. He joins a merchant marine company in the hope that he will be sent to some remote region, which will be so exciting. And indeed, he is sent to the Congo. Now, the mission that is given to him after he joins is to fetch one of the very good agents back to Europe because he's been very ill in Africa. Now, the wealth of the Congo lies in ivory and rubber, but this novel basically talks about ivory. So this agent brings out more ivory than all the other agents put together. I mean, that's mind-boggling to think of it. So Marlowe arrives in Africa, and he is shocked by the brutality and the cruelty of the white colonizers in their treatment of the natives. Now, this perspective, this point of view that we have, the sort of person that Marlowe is, it's important to realize that he's young, He has not come here to make money. He's come here to have adventure, So he's come with an open mind. So what he sees is a sort of fresh insight to the reality of what is going on in that country. So in a way, Marlowe sees things the way you and I would see them. What he sees is crazy things are happening. There's lots of work, Remember, work, that is a word that King Leopold had used, that they must be taught work, the work ethic. Well, there's lots of work going on, but there seems to be no goal in sight. I mean, the natives are plodding and they're actually chained round the neck. Imagine, chained to each other with iron collars around their necks and chains linking them. Six, a group of six, working and staggering and practically collapsing and dying because of the work that they're doing. And the work doesn't even seem to have any kind of accomplishment. For example, Marlowe sees a hole which has been dug in the ground. For what, he cannot imagine. Then a cliff is being blasted with dynamite, but the road that is being taken through did not need to go through that cliff. So all these crazy things are happening. He also hears that there's a person called Kurtz. This person called Kurtz, who he's to bring back, is great. He's doing great work, but he senses jealousy and resentment of his success. So nobody says they like him, but they say that he is to be admired, He has gone native, has joined the tribes in their unspeakable rights. Now, what I have to say right at the beginning is that there's so much ambiguity in this novel. And after reading it 20 times also, there are many things that you're just not going to find out or know because Conrad does not let you find out. He remains deliberately vague. This novel is often given as an example of impressionism, where only the sort of the larger impression is given, but details are not given. Now, Kurtz is very ill, and one sec, oops. So what do we see now? As Marlowe approaches, now he's in a ship and he's approaching Africa, and he's goes around the coast for of some 10 days, and he sees a French man of war, a ship with cannons, shooting into the bush. But there's nothing there. There's no village. There are no people. What is it shooting at? Then when he lands, sees, as I said, the hole in the ground, dug for who knows what reason. Then there is a person who is a brick maker. But there are no bricks being made. And there is no raw material for bricks either. There's a railway truck. Now, a railway track is being laid. There's a railway truck lying upside down in the middle of nowhere. A cliff being blasted for no reason. A warehouse bursts into flame, and a random nigger, I've put that in quotation marks. I can barely enunciate that word. It is so politically incorrect today. But remember, this is very long ago. Conrad uses the word, all right? Or let's say Marlowe uses the word, but it's Conrad who gives him the word. So a random nigger is just picked up and thrashed. We really don't know whether he is responsible. The complete disregard for the feelings of the natives. Now the accountant is this amazing, he's like a mirage, he's like an apparition. He's dressed completely in sort of a three-piece European suit in the middle of Africa. And Marlowe finds this kind of weird. And he says, how'd you do it? How'd you maintain this Europeanness of yours? And the accountant very coldly says, well, I've taught one of these native women to do it. She has a distaste for the work, but so what? So, okay. So the natives are being used for work that is senseless. Marlowe gets a sense of eyes, peering through the jungle, the sound of drums every now and then. There's a sense of greed and ambition, robbery and violence going on, secrecy, suspicion, plotting, scheming, surveillance. Now, Conrad is excellent at building up this atmosphere, of this mutual suspicion, people willing to stab each other in the back for career prospects. One wonders what is going on, secrecy. And secrecy about what? I mean, about, frankly, pretty mundane things. But the greed is overwhelming. Everybody wants to make money. So once Marlowe is in the Congo, he first goes to outer station, then he has to walk some 200 miles to the central station. Then there's a long journey. That's a 15-day hike. Then there's a journey of some couple of months to the inner station where Kurtz is and where Kurtz has to be fetched from. Now this journey, now of course, when there's a journey, you know, of course, it's a metaphor as well. Now, in the purely literal sense, this is the journey along the Congo River with its many turns and twists and tributaries. Apparently, it's very difficult to navigate. There are places where it is very shallow. There are rocks. There are tree roots. Very difficult. It's like life, which is very difficult to navigate through. But they do their best. There's dense jungle, there's mist, there's fog, the air is opaque, it is impenetrable, it is impassive, the stillness of an implacable force brooding over an inscrutable intention. Look at that language. In fact, there's this very good critic called F.R. Lewis who has talked about the adjectival insistence upon inexpressible and incomprehensible mystery. So there are lots of adjectives like incomprehensible, inexplicable, inexpressible, inscrutable, impassive, unspeakable, impenetrable, and so on. A lot of these negative adjectives. Now, on the now Marlowe has to take a boat to go this journey, and he is the captain of the boat. He has to repair the boat. It takes 3 months to repair the boat. Then they set off on that journey. Now, who should he have as crew? He has 20 cannibals as crew. The cannibals have brought their own food, and the food is little lilac-colored balls wrapped up in leaves. And Marlowe says that they're so tiny. What kind of nutrition could they possibly give? And he sort of is a little worried about them. Their payment is not in money, but in copper wire. So they get sort of a 9-inch piece of copper wire every so many days, every week or so. And Marlowe wonders, what are they supposed to do with the copper wire? Eat it? Because there are no villages where there might be shops or where they could exchange those wires for food. He just doesn't know how they manage. Now, when I say that he's shocked by what he sees, I think what we're seeing is the voice of English liberalism. Now, Conrad believed that England was better than the other European nations, and so like an Englishman who is kinder, more sympathetic, more empathetic, he worries, he feels bad, he is shocked. People of other nations possibly couldn't care less. But of course, Conrad has been criticized for being very racist. So we'll talk about that. Now, the description of the journey and the area, that they're going through. Now, look at this line. We were wanderers on a prehistoric earth, deeper and deeper into the heart of darkness. This is, of course, where the title comes from. Prehistoric, what does that mean? So long ago, before civilization. So there's this constant indication that Africa is a pre-civilized place. In short, uncivilized place. They are savages, they are tribals, and so on. A heart of darkness. Now I leave you to think about this. Is it the heart of darkness in the sense the dark continent and the middle of it, which the Congo practically is? Why is it the dark continent? Is it because it is unknown? Is it because we are ignorant of it? Is it because it is unsavory? It is evil? What, exactly is it? But of course, the journey acts as a metaphor. What Marlowe hears of Kurtz. Now, everyone he meets talks about Kurtz. So that very quickly, Marlowe becomes very curious and there's a lot of suspense. He's waiting, really waiting to meet him. And not so much to meet him, he says, as to hear him, to listen to him, because he gets the impression that he's a great speaker. And indeed, apparently he is. And there's a Russian character that you meet later who says, when Marlowe says, so, do you talk to him? And he says, talk to him? You don't talk to him, you listen to him. He has, expanded my mind, and so on and so forth. So Marlowe thinks of him as a voice, and he's hoping very soon to be able to listen to him. Later on, Kurtz's cousin tells him that he was a journalist before he went to Africa. He was also an organ player. He played the organ with great skill, apparently, and he was a very good speaker. He should have been a politician. So Marlowe says, which party? And he says, oh, any party. He was that kind of speaker. He could convince you of anything, which is wonderful and strange, right? Both. There's also a painting that Marlowe sees, which is supposed to have been painted by Kurtz. So apparently he has artistic skills also. So what was Kurtz like ultimately? Now, the name apparently means short in German. So Marlowe says, of course, the irony had to be there that he was very tall, exceptionally tall. We are told his father was half French and his mother half English, and he sort of represents the whole of Europe in that sense. He came from a very poor family, and his fiance's family did not approve of him as a suitor. So in order to become worthy of her, he comes to Africa to make money. The idea was to stay for about 3 years, but after 11 years, he has no desire to go back. He is the best agent, he gets more ivory than anyone else, but his methods are considered unsound. Now, unsound in what sense? So what he has done is he's managed to get close to the tribes, and he has used his guns and his advanced knowledge to impress them, and he has set up as their god. Now, this is where the shock, begins to build up. Now, has got close to the tribes, okay, joined them, okay, but set up as their god. Oh my gosh. And they apparently worship him. And he dictates to them and he uses them to get ivory. So, of course, they have given him all the ivory that they have. He makes them go to war with other tribes to steal their ivory also. This is how he gets the ivory. Now, what about any work ethics that Leopold might have talked about? Marlowe is shocked to see the fence around his house. And he thinks it's decorated with some balls. But when he comes closer, he realizes they're decorated with human heads. Now, when he talks to the Russian about it, expresses the fact that he's appalled, the Russian says, oh, but they're the heads of enemies. So he has been attracted by the sound of the drums and the beat of the dance. And, Marlowe has heard this on the journey, and he has got faintly interested. And at one point he says, are you asking me why I didn't stop the boat and hop off and join them for a dance and a yell? I had work to do, that's why. But please note that the desire or the interest has been sparked in him. It doesn't happen to everyone. And as Marlowe says, some people have so little imagination that they can't imagine any other way of life. The fools, the fools have no imagination. Maybe Kurtz had too much imagination. But then where does one draw the line? At what point does imagination become too much imagination? So Kurtz has participated in some unspeakable rights. And when I first read this novel, I must have been 18 or so. I read it and I thought, oh, unspeakable rights. Hey, I finished the novel and I don't know what rights they were. I've missed something. So I went back to the beginning and read it again. But we are never told. And why are we never told? Now, this is the atmosphere that Conrad builds up by keeping things ambiguous. You know how an open end is always more memorable than a conclusive end. So you don't know, and you're wondering what could it have been. And I think if he had named it, and some critics have said maybe it's cannibalism, maybe that's what he indulged in, but then we would have known, however awful it was. But now we don't know. And our imagination runs riot, wondering. Now, Marlowe says his soul was mad. Being alone in the wilderness, it had looked within itself. Now, is this what heart of darkness means? Not Africa, not the journey, but your own heart, the individual heart. How many of us really look deep into the heart? That expression, self-knowledge. How many of us really know ourselves? Do we ever allow ourselves to know what terrible thoughts and desires lurk within that heart of darkness because we don't know it within ourselves? But being alone in the wilderness. So now this is like in Lord of the Flies, the absence of the policeman, the absence of the authority figure, the absence of society, the absence of colleagues whose opinion matters. He's out there on his own. What does it matter what he does? So he has looked inside himself, he has discovered what he likes, and he has indulged himself. He's an egotist, my ivory, my intended, my station, my river, my... And his voice. Now, when Marlowe finally meets him, he does have an amazing voice. Although he's weak, he's ill, and he dies soon, but the voice is still there. Now, he has been asked, now there's such a thing as a society for the suppression of savage customs. Now, you see that pose of colonialism, that you're going to uplift these miserable barbaric natives and teach them a better way of life and all that. So he was entrusted with writing a report about how they should improve the life of these savages. And he's actually written a 17-page report for them. And Leopold also had such a society, such a group, projecting as if they were doing good for these people. But in the margin of that report is written, exterminate all the brutes. Now, Marlowe wonders, and with him we wonder, what is this all about? What do these words mean? Kurtz is in Marlowe's care on the boat when they take him back. And he dies soon. And it seems that Marlowe is the one who has heard his dying words, the last words he speaks before he dies. Now, Marlowe is not there at that moment. Oh, sorry, he's there when he speaks the word. He's not there when he dies. So he goes out, and very soon afterwards, the news comes that Kurtz has died. But the horror, these are the words that he speaks at the end. Now, they say that you're supposed to sum up your life before you die. If this is the summation of Kurtz's life, what does it mean? What is the horror? Is it what he has done in the sense that he joined the natives and lived life like them, that he descended to that level of savagery and barbarism? Is that what the horror is? Or is the horror what he did to them? Enslave them, take the position of a god, trick them, fool them. Is that what the horror is all about? Now, Marlowe. These are the two important characters. By the way, in these few pages, Conrad introduces many characters, and each of them is singular and worth mentioning, but I can't, that there's just not enough time. So maybe it'll come up in the question time. So he's in, now the story is narrated by Marlowe, but it is reported by another sailor. So they're on this yawl, which is, a small boat, and there are 4 or 5 of them on the boat, and it is becoming evening. They are on the Thames, at the mouth of the Thames, and Marlowe starts telling the story. And the entire story is within quotation marks because it is reported by this other sailor. Now, this is an old Marlowe who's talking of an experience he had when he was young. So that many years have gone by. Now, he is an honest sailor, an adventurer, not looking for any gain. We expect him to be an reliable narrator because at one point he even says, I hate, detest, and can't bear a lie. So we presume he won't be telling any lies. And he has the fresh sight of a first time visitor to Africa and a young man, a young innocent man as it is. So he's young, he's clear sighted, unprejudiced. But when you say unprejudiced, can anyone really be entirely unprejudiced? Of course, he has the inbuilt notions that he has grown up with, that he's been conditioned with. Now he's shocked to see how badly the natives are treated. As I said, is this the voice of English liberalism, that the English would be better colonizers than, say, the Italians or the Germans or whatever? And by the way, almost every country is represented in the novel. You have characters, you have a Swede, you have a Dane, you have a Russian, and so on and so forth. So it's pan Europe, as it were. He's shocked to realize that, now, on the boat, when these cannibals are his crew and he has to communicate with them somehow, and he manages, at one point he says that I had to realize that they also belong to the same species as me. I share humanity with them. Well, now, are we to be glad? Are we to applaud Marlowe that he realizes this? Or are we to think, oh my God, he has to realize this? So you see, you can read it in more than one way. Now, he's curious about Kurtz, he's ready to admire him, but he's shocked when he actually meets him and sees him. He comes close to understanding the call of the jungle. The call of the jungle, which Kurtz has answered and gone native, as it were. He comes close to understanding it. He can imagine the attraction. Oops. Yeah. So as I said, reliable narrator in the sense he doesn't like lies. He's young, honest, and disinterested. It's in quotation marks, so his actual words, but unreliable narrator because it is reported by someone else. So has that guy got the words right? It is told in the evening after it is dark. Everyone apparently is sort of falling asleep, waiting, doing nothing. And a few times, the sailor wonders whether anyone was awake. So then we have to wonder, did he also fall asleep in between any time and miss something? Also, Marlowe himself, when he reports something, um, at one instance, he is asleep when two people, the manager and the uncle, come and start talking, and he sort of vaguely wakes up and he sort of vaguely hears, but not really well. So again, his inferences are going to be not exactly correct. Now, the big question with this novel is it racist? That's the big question. So we're talking of colonialism. Now, I would say colonization presupposes racism because colonizers colonize because they believe that they are superior to the people they are colonizing and that they're going to be able to do them some good. This is the typical pose of the colonizer. The characterization of Africa as a dark land, an incomprehensible continent, that comes through both in the title and in the description of various things that Marlowe sees. So the white people do not understand Africa. They do not understand the people. They do not understand their way of living, not at all. Now, the African people, who are the workers after all, are referred to by Marlowe as natives, savages, tribals, angles. He says there was acute angles and in the shade, and he realizes, oh, they're savages lying down to die after being exhausted by their work. They're called shapes, they're called shadows, they're called niggers, but they're not called people. ever. Now, Chinua Achebe makes this point that the Africans are denied a voice. How come no African speaks in the entire novel? How come? Why they're not allowed to speak? We hear Africans speak only twice. Once is when one of the cannibals, when someone is shot and he dies and Marlowe throws him into the water. This guy says, why did you throw him into the water? You should have given them to me. And Marlowe says, what would you do with him? And he says, eat him. Okay. Now remember, those poor cannibals have no food. They only have copper wire. And as Marlowe says, they can hardly eat it. So yes, that would have been food. So that's when he speaks. And the other time is when Kurtz dies and the manager's boy. Now, those of us who've read fiction by Black Americans, this thing of calling even a grown African American boy, it's so demeaning. So the manager's boy, that's what he's called, pops his head in and says, Mr. Kurtz, he dead. It's so disrespectful and so uncivilized. Throughout the novel, the implication is that the Africans are uncivilized. Dehumanization happens through denial of voice, and the characterization as like that manager's boy. Is this the way to report the death of such an eminent person as Kurtz? So the characterization of Africans as sort of underdeveloped, and also, of course, viewing them throughout as the other, that incomprehensible other. The drums, the dancing, the nakedness are all seen as savage, primal, uncivilized. And Kurtz, although he's admired for his success in getting ivory, is thought to be losing his mind by his European colleagues. That's the only way they can view his going native. So is it racist? Now, on the other hand, now we've seen how it is racist. Now, can we say that Marlowe describes what he sees without prejudice or judgment, and he does indict the white colonizers for their cruelty? So isn't this a critique of colonization, a critique of racism? He realizes that the cannibals on his boat are more civilized than the white pilgrims. Now they're called pilgrims. They're actually just members of the company. They're going to, find ivory and all that. But see, they call themselves pilgrims and workers, the white people, but they call the Africans criminals and enemies. Look at the nomenclature. Now, the cannibals, as Marlowe realizes, it's a long journey, but they never attack any white person on the boat to eat them. After all, they are cannibals. They never even look greedily, as it were, at any of the white people. So there's no, clearly they are civilized. They have restraint, which is sort of the definition of civilization that we are offered. He realizes that he and the cannibals are the same species. There is some shock involved, but let's say, hey, he realizes it. He's able to appreciate now. How does Kurtz join the tribe and live that kind of life and all that? How? The white people can't understand it at all. They're flummoxed. But Marlowe says it's only a fool who has so little imagination that he can't imagine any other way of life. If you have some imagination, you will be able to imagine another way of life. And you get the feeling that Marlowe is intrigued. And he says, are you wondering why I didn't jump ashore and try it? I couldn't. I was too busy. But it's there, that slight interest. So the imagination is there. Now, what is the meaning of the horror? Is it regret for joining the natives? Or is it regret for exploiting the natives? Now, what does it mean? What a terrible cry and all that. Now, soon after Kurtz falls ill and dies, Marlowe also falls ill and almost dies. And when he comes out of that, he says, I wonder, he says, almost saw death. I almost went there, but I didn't finally. Now, had I died, what would I have said? And he wonders whether he would have had anything at all to say. So there he says, better that cry, the horror, than having nothing to say as a summation of your life before you die. Another point that Chinua Achebe raises is or that many critics raise, is the contrast of there's this very majestic African woman who is dressed in, not dressed in clothes, but, in finery, sort of necklaces and stuff like that, more than the others. Now, is she his woman? I mean, we really don't know. That ambiguity, clicks in. We do not know. But she's there, and she cries out and raises her arms to heaven when they are taking Kurtz away. But the contrast with Kurtz's fiancée, because Marlowe then goes back to Europe, and before Kurtz dies, he gives him all his precious belongings, which are that 17-page report and some letters, bound up with string. And many of them are letters to and from his fiancée. And he thinks that it is only right if he goes and meets her and gives back the letters. So he goes to meet her. Now, these are almost the only two women, and we see them both for a very short space, but the intended is given speech. She is not only allowed to speak, but she is listened to. She is, she's described as a very evolved person. She is not a young thing, but a mature woman. She wants to know about Kurt. She admires him. She's in mourning even 1 year after his death when Marlowe goes to meet her. So look at the depth of her feeling. She is allowed all this, but the African woman is allowed nothing. Now, the question of civilization, to me, it is not the question of racism and colonialism that is so important as this question of civilization. So who is civilized and who is not? Now, if you remember in The Lord of the Flies also, that question arose. So the way the storyline is framed is very interesting. The first few pages, which I will say are difficult to get through, okay, but very rewarding once you have got through them, because I guarantee you will go back and you will read them again. So we are told that that yawl, the cruising yawl, the Nelly on which these 4 or 5 sailors are sitting, is in the mouth of the Thames. And Marlowe ruminates and he says that London, which is today the greatest city in the world, the most civilized, the most progressive, the most admired, the most desirable destination, was also once upon a time a dark place. It was an uncivilized place until the Romans came, conquered it, and made it civilized. They gave it their civilization. So this comparison between London and the Congo is kind of surprising, but it asks the question that there are different civilizations. Is there, and in Africa, are we to see it as a lack of civilization? Or are we to see it as a different civilization, which the Europeans do not recognize as civilization because it is so different from theirs? So are the African people uncivilized? Or do they have a very different civilizations that is just incomprehensible, to use Conrad's own word, incomprehensible to the Europeans? Are restraint, control, discipline the hallmarks of civilization? Is that accountant who can continue to dress in that 3-piece suit in the heat of Africa, is he the epitome of civilization? Is that what it's all about? How thin a veneer is our so-called civilization? Can we drop it? Can we join the tribes? Can we turn savage? Can we turn savage thinking we have left civilization behind, or that we have entered a different kind of civilization. Now, Chinua Achebe, who's a Nigerian novelist that you have probably heard of, and his most famous novel is Things Fall Apart. And very often that is contrasted with this novel because in that novel, Chinua Achebe shows what life in Nigeria is like. And it is completely unprejudiced. It is, and it's sort of as objective a vision as it can get. Things are just stated. This is what they do. Now you can think whether it's good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. He asks. Now he's very angry with Conrad, and he accuses Conrad of being racist, and he says, "Oh, just because you recognize that the cannibals are also human like you, isn't enough." Now, I would say at this point, because time is short, I'm going to say it right now. I would say that it's like in To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus says it's a baby step forward. Okay. I would say Marlowe and maybe Conrad, whose spokesman he is possibly, have come a couple of baby steps forward in recognizing the co-humanity of these people, but they haven't come far enough to recognize that way of life as a different culture, maybe as good a culture, but just different than theirs. Now, I can't say ours because, hey, I'm not European, so I'm saying theirs. So he accuses Conrad of xenophobia, dehumanization, and creating a prejudiced view of Africa because this book is so iconic. It is prescribed, in the syllabus of universities, and it has been canonized. And then people are going to take seriously that view of Africa that is shown in this novel, and it's doing a lot of damage, according to him. So there we are. That's my way of taking you through the novel quickly.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you talked about the horror, it is not because of it's because of something he has seen. It's not because of the killings or anything like that, but something he has seen which is far different than anywhere else that he mentions. So I feel that Go ahead.
I'll ask you the question: is it something he's seen or something he's done? Something he's
either seen,
experienced. And I can't. There's no answer because Conrad doesn't give you an answer, right?
Because
so
it seems more the reason that either he has seen or the same. It is not what is happening or what he would like to happen. What he has seen, and it is something which will keep you thinking, kya dekha hoga? What is it that is there? That's how it looks.
It's like the unspeakable rights that he has participated in. What are those unspeakable? That's the sense of horror that is built up in the novel around Kurtz is amazing. It's very well done. So you're going to be wondering forever because there is no answer.
And the second thing that you talked about,
if I may just say, is it something he's done, or that he's participated in, or is it something that he has done to others, to the tribe? Is it the horror of the way he enslaved and fooled the tribe into thinking he was a god? It's not fair, is it? Is it that? I mean, could he descend to do that? So
okay.
it's
So it is, there's a difference. I always felt that what he has seen is there, because in English literature, everywhere you see the horror is never about something which he has done, but it is what he has seen is there. If you see in other places, so many times in movies also, they talked about the horror is something which they have seen. That's how it comes through. Okay, one question, one other little thing, but I would like to tell you the same. The Europeans were, well, according to Indians, they were not civilized at all. Jahangir were the first people, saying British trader came through. He got him from Surat to Agra, and asked him 101 questions about. They said that how can people live like what they are living, is what Jahangir felt about the European world. And this William Dalrymple talks about when the British were taking over. It has been remarked that these blighters cannot wash their bottoms and still want to rule us. To that extent, that how uncivilized these people are.
So there you are. You see two different civilizations, right? Two different civilizations. Each thinks the other is inferior to theirs.
That's always so. That's a worldwide thing that he's uncivilized. That is how we look at it.
Difference, right?
Difference. In fact, Mohini used to have a subject in one of the colleges, the politics of difference. And this is what.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else has questions and comments?
Oh, yes.
Prashant, go ahead.
I begin by saying Mohini did a very fine job, very comprehensive, covering almost every aspect of the novel. I just want to add a few observations, mostly about the technique of the novel. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly about the form of the novel. First of all, you observe that the novel has very little dialogue. It's almost entirely in the form of narration, description, reflections, observations. And it's also interesting that Marlowe keeps on coming back to the 3 or 4 people who are with him. I guess the total number of people on the ship is about 5 or maybe 4, we are not told, but he keeps on coming back to them. He never gets entirely lost in the story. So in that sense, we're always made aware that here is a man telling the inner story. Actually, I'm so glad you referred to the first 3-4 pages. I just have a couple of quotations from there. And they might be able to throw some more light on the technique. But Marlowe, Conrad says, the narrator says, to him, the meaning of an episode was not inside like a kernel, but outside, enveloping the tale, which brought it out only as a glow brings out a haze in the likeness of one of those misty halos that sometimes are made visible by the spectral illumination of moonshine. So I think that is made very clear that we are never able to get the entire truth in the novel. I also want to mention one of the early examples of Marlowe's pride in British imperialism. I remember a long time back when I had gone to the Globe Theatre, somebody was showing us around, says, here is Nelson, the greatest Englishman that ever was. Obviously, because Nelson's defeat of Napoleon's fleet, in a sense, prepared for the naval supremacy of England, which ultimately was the cause of the world power, ultimately. So obviously, the technique is very, very important. And I think Conrad has done a very fine job in using double narratives. You also observe early in the novel, the main narrator, who is not named as far as I can remember, tells us a few things about Marlowe. The very interesting thing is he compares him to Buddha. And that comparison comes back at the end also. So he's seen as a calm, composed person, but I'm not sure if that's a correct description. Obviously, the main narrator, outer narrator, is perhaps as much of a, shall I say, colonialist as Marlowe is. So I guess it's good to remember some of these aspects of the technique of the novel, which do contribute to its power. I agree with you. The first few pages are very slow, and we have to have a lot of patience to go through with it. But even later, I think it's slow reading. I didn't find it fast.
Very dense. It's very dense.
And just about the river, I think the journey down the river is a journey down time. It's a journey in time. I think I'm glad you mentioned all these points. I just thought I'll elaborate on some of these.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Prashant.
Anyone else? Farooq?
This particular novel reminds me of the novel written Into Africa, where Henry Morton Stanley went to discover Livingstone.
Ah, yeah.
Capitans.
Well, that Henry Stanley, was an agent of King Leopold.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes. In fact, he made a lot of deals with the local chiefs in the Congo, you know, to sort of buy ivory and to buy slaves, to contract slave labor.
As you said, the contrast of civilization, no, Mohini. I read in that book that the Africans had no use for ivory, and they had so much ivory that their houses, the village houses, used to be
For
filled
bursting
with
with it.
ivory. And when the foreigners must have gone, their mouths must have watered, so much ivory lying around doing nothing. They had no use for ivory, and so that was one contrast of civilization, where for us this ivory was so important for the British,
Yes.
and for the Africans it was all over. They didn't need them, and they were exploited for it. The
Right.
second thing is this godlike feature of Kurt that you talk about. Henry Livingston, Livingston, I don't know, Jonathan Livingston, his name was?
David Livingston,
David
I think
Livingston.
it's.
David Livingston was also treated like a god. When Henry Stanley met him, he found that Livingston was like a god there. He was he had so many African wives and things like that, and everybody used to treat him like a god. And there's a part of the journey where Stanley also went with Livingston, and he saw the amount of power Livingston had in that African area. So a lot of the instances.
Yes, yes. And in fact, it is said that Kurtz is possibly modeled on a real life person.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 likely models are there. There's a guy called George Antoine Klein, who is the most likely, because Conrad gives a lot of his autobiographical experiences. And he actually carried that person in his boat when he went. So Kurtz may be that person. So this kind of thing actually happened.
One more historical coincidence that I can think of is that this Livingston and the Stanley episode took place around 1857, 1858 or something, or 1862, something, 1865 maximum. I remember that was the same time as the war in USA for the slavery. Now, this particular novel must have been written in 1874 or something like that, what I remember by that.
It's 1899.
Yeah, 1899. And this gentleman, this Henry Morton Stanley, who discovered Livingston, while coming back, the whole story was based upon discovering the source of the Nile. But that's the reason why all the adventurers went, But Henry Stanley was appointed initially by an American company to discover Livingston, if I remember right. And after he discovered Livingston and found whatever I don't remember what happened to Livingston. I think Livingston died. Then he started coming back out of the African continent by the other way. He came in through Zanzibar, but he went the other way. And he thought he's discovered the Nile, and actually came down the river, and it was the Congo. He came down the Congo the other way from that lake.
I see.
And that is a time when people found the route to the Congo from the western coast properly. The whole Congo River was discovered in 1400 or 1500, but this route to cross Africa from Congo or from Zanzibar was approximately at that time. And that's why this novel makes sense, because this was in 1890. So the descriptions of the Congo River and all must be very accurate, because all these guys used to go back to England and give talks about their travel and things like that. So that's the the coincidences that I could sense from this.
Right. Yeah.
Suchitra has something to say. Suchitra Sonarka.
I want to say something, George Mohini.
Shall we hear Indu until Suchitra is?
Yeah, that the brutality, it's portrayed so well. The fact that they could exploit the resources, the people, and they forced slave labor upon them. And this was, I think it was all possible because this colony was thousands of miles away from Belgium, and the people couldn't condemn what they didn't see. So in a way that, Leopold could really do what he wanted, because he just had his own laws. He didn't have to, he was not accountable to anyone. and his whole aim. And I'm told that I've read that he amassed all this for himself.
Yes,
More than
it was
the
his
people.
personal
Yes. So
wealth, yes.
this right, for his personal wealth. So it was all possible because it was so far away. So the people didn't know what was happening.
They're subhuman. It doesn't matter how they're treated. Okay. Now, of course, Leopold would not be advertising the way he treated them. But there's also this feeling that after all, they're subhuman. What does it matter? And the projection of that pose, that we are there to do good. They're the abysmal miseries of humanity, but we are uplifting them. We're teaching them how to live an honorable way. And I think that was bought. And it took time for people to start questioning. And it's always the more liberal minded people, who are always few, who ask these questions. And the majority just accepts the story that is told to them.
Mo, Sheena
Yes.
wants to ask a question or a comment. After Sheena, it is Latika. No, after Sheena, it's Indu and then Latika.
Okay, Sheena, let's hear you.
I don't want to ask any questions. I just wrote about a book that I had read recently, The Poisonwood Bible.
Okay.
Yeah, about this missionary family from the States, which goes to during the Eisenhower Kennedy admin time, and they go to Congo, and then Congo is getting liberated, and how they interfere. And Patrice Lumumba was murdered by Eisenhower's direction. And all this came to light later. It was quite interesting. I think that it's quite
I have the book. I haven't started reading it.
Yeah, you should read it. It's nice.
Okay.
Indu, you're next.
2, 3 things. Golding also thought of this question of evil and how it works in the heart of man, and this derogatory approach of civilized people towards what we call uncivilized, when that admiral says, "You are all British boys, aren't you?" With such irony. And Ralph wept for the end of innocence and the darkness of man heart.
Yes.
And the fall through the air. And when he thinks in terms of the kind of perpetration of brutality and horror of killing Simon, of killing Piggy, and supposed to be British schoolboys.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the British fancy themselves as being superiors and civilized beings.
I think your point. Yeah. That, if you say discipline, civilization, with all that, and in this novel, Conrad is bringing out the point. I think Conrad, as a man, was very lonely, unhappy, and his kind of, he wanted to project the whole artist thing. It is not the essence of modern belief regarding the nature of the artist. It is the man who goes down into hell, hoping to grasp what is evil and what is bad. And then he thinks he'll come out of it. And Conrad is trying to explain what is that horror, This is the historical beginning of the human soul. Not an outgrown, but established in humanity. We now prefer the reality of its hell to the blind lies of civilization that has overlaid it. It's what I've, in my book, these novels of Golding, where I've compared Graham Greene, Joseph Conrad, a whole bunch of writers who write about these orgies and these terrible experiences and try to give it a, gloss. If you're saying that Conrad is trying to give it a gloss, or he is trying to be mocking from two viewpoints. From Marlowe's viewpoint, so then Lord Jim Marlowe redeemed Jim, who has made a mistake. And then Jim becomes like a god of his people, of his Pakistan. Malaysia. You know, he becomes Lord Jim, and
Yes.
he's revered by the people. In this novel of Conrad, Kurtz is not just a god, but he's feared also. So he's gone like
Weird.
one
Because
step further, like a
he
horror.
has, because
Hmm.
he's forced the tribe to go to war with other tribes
Yeah.
so he can get more ivory.
No, he's writing through devils. He's trying to be part of the people of Africa also. And he's trying to show the power of the civilized world, that he can be a successful manager, and he can subdue the natives and get the best out of them. And I don't know, this particular novel is not just a little novel as you made it so detailed. You said it is so much more that is not spoken of, and it is so terrifying. It is like terrifying the extent of damage that man can do to man,
To
you know,
humanity.
in the course of the novel. And you
Yes.
call them naked people. Everywhere it is contrast. Your climate, your country, your speech, your people, and that controls your culture and your behavior and your clothing. Whole country, you cover yourself with coats and cloaks, and then you say naked people. This is how the prejudice built up over a long period of time, and so powerful. We enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you,
It
Indu.
opens up lots
You know,
of
your
good talk.
voice has been, I don't know, for me at least, your voice has been breaking a lot. And I haven't got everything you said, but you mentioned the report, I think, also. So I just want to point out the two aspects of Kurtz. On the one hand, he has written a report, you know, for the society, which apparently is about the upliftment of the people, right? In whatever terms, in their misled minds, whatever terms, but the upliftment. On the other hand, the reality, what he has been living, is the opposite, isn't it? Right?
That's right. So
Exploiting.
then he's like, a devil is like a two-faced
Yes,
character.
like a god,
That's
like a
how
god or a devil. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes,
devil
yes.
and so-called the great savior of the civilized people. That's what Conrad has tried to say.
Mo, after this, you have Latika has a question. After Latika, Sanjay Saxena, then Prashant has
Sure,
another
let's
case,
hear them one by one. Yes.
and finally Zogrekar.
Okay, so Latika first, right?
Yeah, Latika first.
Hi.
Okay, yes, Latika.
Thanks, Mohini, for a very interesting
Hi.
presentation. You did say in the beginning something that we know, which is that some novels have a end in a way which is the end is open,
Inclusive or open,
and
yes.
some are conclusive.
Hmm.
Now, it could be interesting one way, or it could be interesting the other way, either way. But in this particular case, when so much is left unsaid, as a reader, do you feel satisfied? Because when something is left unsaid about a civilization you don't know, and if it's not explained to you, you just might get prejudiced one way or the other. So as a
See,
reader,
Latika, I have to say, I'm a great believer in the open end, okay? Because I feel that if ends are tied up neatly and you know what's what, then that's that, you know? But when ends are not tied, when you're not sure, the questions keep reverberating and they will do so forever. So I think the ambiguity, the open-endedness work wonderfully. And that is one of the reasons why this novel is so impactful. Because, you know, like those unspeakable rights, I mean, I will wonder to my deathbed what those unspeakable rights are that he has participated in. What was so terrible that Marlowe cannot give it a name? What can it be?
but would you feel that not knowing might turn your mind in a certain direction against a people or for a people?
Not against or for, but wondering. Left wondering. It's the most powerful thing to do to a reader, to leave him wondering.
And Mohini, I agree with you in that. I would like to have a story, not with a clear ending, but with a couple of thoughts. Would it be this way? Would it be that way? What's going to happen next?
And then, and
That
it's
keeps
not
you
only,
involved.
it's not only what was it after all, but then all those related ideas that you think about. You know, what should man be? What is the definition of civilization? You know, all those notions. Can one race really think they are superior to another? Can they be? You just think and think and think.
Okay, Mo, I think
Yeah.
Sanjay Saxena has some
No,
questions, then
actually-
Prashant, and then Satish Jogreka again. So
Okay,
Sanjay,
Sanjay,
Sanjay, please come on.
Yeah, Mohini, thanks a lot for a lovely presentation. First thing I'd like to say is that you must be a wonderful teacher. I mean, you really bring a subject alive.
Well, I love being in the classroom, I will say that.
Yes, and I'm sure your students love to be in the classroom too when you teach.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, my question is this, that is it at all fair to judge events and people of the past
Sanjay, can you speak a little louder?
Oh, sorry, am I audible now?
Come closer to the mic. Yeah.
Is this better, Satish?
Yes.
Is this
So
better?
I would say that, yeah, it's not fair. And I feel that what Conrad presents in this novel was a fairly enlightened attitude in those days. In those days, in the heyday of colonialism, when everyone was gung-ho, they were proud that their country was ruling over these, you know, abysmal creatures, dark-skinned and flat-nosed, all that. They deserved, they needed to be ruled over a more enlightened race. So yes, I think it is an enlightened voice, Marlowe's. But of course, now we have gone so much further. So that is not good enough, which is why I use that expression baby step, you know, from To Kill a Mockingbird. We've come a small way. We have a long way to go, you know, at that point.
The other thing is that even on colonialism, Mohini, I think we need to take a more nuanced view. I mean, there is, of course, the William Dalrymple, Shashi Tharoor, Satish Chandra school of thought. In India, for instance, there were large parts of the country which were not ruled by the British for a single day. And I refer to the kingdoms of the Rajputana. So if you look at Bikaner and Jaisalmer and Jaipur and Jodhpur and a bunch of other ones, okay, it is very hard to argue that people in these territories were better off than in the British provinces like the Bombay Presidency or Bangalore or Madras or Calcutta. That is one. And about the white man killing the blacks, etc. Violence was the norm those days. We know in Delhi last time Latika was telling us there was a slaughter where 40, 50.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, to accuse the white man of doing things which everybody else was also doing. I mean, Indians have been in Africa for 200 years, and we are no less racist than the white man. And probably, you know, so it's easy to pass judgment from today's perspective, but maybe we need to take a more nuanced view.
Yeah. Back and see it in a larger perspective. You're right.
Mohini, Prashant has something to say. After Prashant is Jogrekar, and after Jogrekar is Anna.
Okay, yes, Prashant?
Mohini, my question concerns Conrad's male chauvinism. You observe that he's very embarrassed that you seek the help of a lady, his aunt, to get an appointment on a ship. Then later he says that women should be kept out of all these things. They should not be made aware of what is going on. At a certain point, he even says, it's queer how out of touch with truth women are. They live in a world of their own, and they had never been anything like it and never can be. And you observe that women are kept completely out, as it were, except twice. So is he a male chauvinist?
Yeah, I mean, he says they have no idea, and that he could not tell the fiancée the actuality. There's no way she could have faced it. Yes, I think, yeah, I do think so. I do think so. And also the very absence of women, you know, that's my first point, is the absence of women. Then he can't handle them well at all. And this lightly mocking tone that he uses about his aunt and makes her quite a ridiculous figure. She tells him to wear flannel. He's going to Africa and she says, wear flannel. I mean, she really has no idea. That's the way. So when he says they have no idea, he demonstrates it through his character. But that's not very fair, I feel.
Satish Dogrekar has got something to say. Satish? Dogra, to ayes ka dite?
Yeah, I just have to ask one thing. You know, you mentioned about liberalism of the British.
Yeah.
Now that is really a relative term compared to liberalism compared to what? I mean, the same British applauded Clive when he forced the signature to form the East India Company. And in the parliament, there was only one dissenting vote. All of the other guys voted in favor of Clive. So I don't know what liberalism really meant then and now. So
yeah, so this image of Britain being better than the other countries, I don't know. I think
I don't agree with that. That's what I'm
better
saying.
Than me. Prashant?
I don't agree with it because I'm just giving you the classical example of Clive. Only one dissenting vote when he had forced the signature. Okay, so that's all. I mean,
but let's remember, can I intervene? That
yes,
England and
please.
France were democracies. Germany hardly was a democracy. Bismarck was ruling initially through the goodwill of the emperor, and of course he had carried the Kaiser, as it said, to the position of the the emperor of entire Germany, and Portugal, Belgium, Italy were hardly democracies then.
That's true.
England and France were the only democracy, and the idea was that we are democratic at home, we'll be more liberal outside also. And I think there is some truth in it.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
You know, we all remember, I was very young then, what happened in 1960 when they killed Patrice Lumumba. You see, all that matter, what happened, in the Portuguese colonies. It seems Goa was not so bad as the Portuguese colonies in Africa. The countries which are not democracies at home are usually much worse in the colonies than democracies at home. I mean, I thought that by and large, England and France were more civilized as colonial powers than, let's say, Belgium. Of course, Germany lost its colonies very soon after the First World War. So,
what about
I think that
what about the Dutch?
Sense.
The Dutch and what they did in Malaysia, not Malaysia, in Indonesia. They were very, very cruel.
Dutch.
As were the Italians in Eritrea.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Italians in Eritrea.
I mean, the British and the Dutch in South Africa, they did horrible things. And it was not just the Dutch, it was the Dutch along with the British. Yes. And secondly is, even in the Middle East, Lebanon and Jordan were created between the French and the British. The British kept Jordan and the French kept Lebanon. I mean, they basically created havoc in a lot of these countries jointly and together with other colonial powers. So I will not be so kind to the British either.
No, neither will I. Neither will I.
Unless you're worse than the British and French.
Yeah, possibly Britain was the best of a bad lot,
What is, I mean, it's like आपण मराठीत बोलतो ना, दगडापेक्षा वीट मऊ.
That's it, best of a bad lot. Yeah.
दगडापेक्षा वीट मऊ.
Okay. Fairly close. France to democracy. Yeah.
I think Anna wants to ask a question. Anna is there? Anna, switch yourself on. Switch your audio on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very clearly.
Yeah. So I only wanted to observe that good and bad is in all human beings, regardless of the color of the skin.
Yes.
It's not that because we are black or brown that we are good. So here we have in this book, a white man calling out his own people, right? That you are doing wrong.
Which is why
you also have African voices that have called out Africans. For example, in Things Fall Apart, Chube, I can't pronounce his name very well, He has called out his own people that you yourselves have led to what happened. Your practices, your disunity, your practices of selling each other out have permitted this to happen. So in that sense, it's correct that the whites should call out the whites. Those who were colonized should see, what did we do to let this happen to us? Those who were enslaved. Absolutely. Yeah, so that, I mean, that's all I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's like so in India, I mean, you know, there were so many betrayals and we did not stand united against them.
Yeah. So we are all united as a human beings against power, greed, corruption. And these authors are the ones who give us the strength to keep our voices loud and clear, no? I mean, that's what I feel.
Okay, I think no more questions. No more questions. I have to make one statement. About a decade back, Mohini and I were invited by a branch of the New York Public Library to join in their book club with this book. And it was so steady. Look at us, the way we asking questions. They were very steady. In fact, they were wearing ties and jackets and we were wearing jeans and t-shirt. And well, that was how it was. That's the New York Public Library. And the second thing is, just wanted to share something with you. The person who was to speak let us know on Tuesday night that he couldn't speak there. So fine, we had to rush through. Mohini, I said, no, we will have a program. I will say something and do it. Kudos to her to be able to sit down in a short 3-4 days, was able to get it going. And thank you very much, our tech team. The tech team of Tushar and Abid very quickly helped us out. And Tushar is an artist, by the way he does his flyers. And now you tell him, spelling mein ek do mistake hoga, mere se bhi hota hai, Mohini. So he's excellent and does a good job, very good job, very friendly. I wish he's there. Can't see him around.
Today he's not there, but
yeah, please.
The Facebook part, you know.
Please, Farooq, tell him that we said 3 cheers to him. He did a very good job. And Abid is on the block nowadays. Naya aaya to kaha tha, Abid dekho, you're an expert now. So I'm very, very glad with this team that we have here. Thank you very much. And Farooq, thank you very much for getting these boys to be so excellent. Mo, yes, you did it the last time, a very short time. The number of questions that have been asked shows how it is. And there are many people who just said, thanking you, being said. Everyone seems to have enjoyed. Thanks a lot more for everything. Please tell us about what is going to be for the next Saturday and next Sunday and others.
Okay.
Just one little point, 1 second.
Yes.
Mohini, as Sanjay Saxena has said, I would have liked to be your student. Thank you.
Anil. That is the ultimate compliment. Thank you so much. So next Sunday, we have Sheena Shahani talking about...
Sheena, raise your hand. There's Sheena.
Yes, Sheena is here with us today.
And where is she from?
She's in Dubai, I think.
She's still in Dubai, everybody.
But
I will be returning in June.
Okay. So Sheena Shahani will join us from Dubai to analyze Murakami's novel, IQ84. Okay, so that's what
it's 1Q84.
1Q84.
1Q84, yes. 1984 with the 9 repeats.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm totally intrigued by this title, Sheena, dying to find out what it's all about. Yes.
Mohini, you know, today's and my presentation is going to be very different from yours because it's going to be very image-centric. And this book is almost 1,000 pages. So in order to compress the story, it's going to take a little while, but I will try and finish it within 35 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
With a lot of pictures, not so much of text.
Sure.
And it is very, very, very open-ended.
Great. I like that. I like that very much.
Excellent. And the Sunday after that...
Agreed. Mo, fix up Anna for Sophie's Choice.
Okay, wonderful. We shall fix a date. On the 13th of June, we have Pakhi Bhatia joining us from Delhi, doing Samskara. by UR Anantamurthy. And 20th June, we have, this is a writer called Chang Ray Lee, who's making waves in the US at least. And the title of the book is My Year Abroad, which has won awards and all that. So Sonal, our daughter, is going to be presenting that. Okay, so that's what we have to look forward to.
Farooq has to say something.
Okay. I just want to tell you that Guldasta Urdu, after a break of 3 months, is coming back, and we'll be having a program on this Saturday at 7:30. And I'm sharing the screen to show you the program. It is a tribute to two of our members whom we lost due to COVID, Vijaya Teksingani and Shamshad Takidar. And we have curated a very nice program along with the poetry and ghazals and short stories that these two ladies have written. Both were very good friends. Both were very, very prominent in the Urdu Hindi circles of Pune, and during the online moment last year, they took part in a lot of ghazals and mehfils all over the world. We lost both of them within 10 days in the month of April and May. They were part of our Guldasta managing committee group. They took part in many Gyanadab Guldasta programs. So I request the whole managing committee to be there. We'll be reading their poetry. And Vijay Teksingani even wrote some poetry in English, which Mohini is going to read. But the program is going to be mainly, the first part is on Vijay Teksingani, what she wrote in Hindi and Marathi, then something in English, and then what Shamshad wrote in Urdu. Shamshad was a very, very good writer, and she has written 7 books. And we'll be covering all of them. And the people who supervise them and mentored them, they will be also present in the meeting. It's going to be a little bit emotional because the family is also going to join. But this is our first program. And on 29th of June, Satish, we'll be taking a program on Kaifi Azmi.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Kaifi Azmi is a very prominent Urdu poet, writer. He has written...
Yeah. We all know about him.
He has written the book Garam Hawa, the story of Garam Hawa, and that love story, which was written totally in poetry. I forget the name, which Vijay Anand produced. You know that.
Garam Hawa was an excellent movie. I love the movie.
Hi Ranja was a total movie written in poetry, so we'll be covering Kaifi Azmi on 29th of June. So this is the Urdu layer to our
calendar. Yes.
So I request everybody next Saturday, 7:30.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farooq. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We hope to see you next Sunday. All the best. Bye-bye.
All the very best. Bye.